The year was 2387. Earth had been part of the big space government for almost 200 years. People called it the Galactic Federation. Humans were known across the galaxy as peaceful traders and smart scientists. Most people thought Earth's violent past was long gone. The trouble started when a cry for help reached the Federation's main office. It came from a star system far away called Kepler 442. The people living there were called the Zilani. They looked like tall, thin deer, but walked on two legs. They were plant eaters who grew the best food in the galaxy. Everyone liked them because they never fought anyone. But now something terrible was happening to them. A group of alien monsters called the Vorthak Swarm was attacking their worlds. These creatures were like giant bugs that ate everything in their path. They turned whole planets into food for themselves. They worked together like one giant mind controlling millions of bodies. Admiral Kextar sat in his big chair at Federation headquarters. He had 6 arms and looked like a giant insect himself, but he was one of the good guys. He stared at the reports coming in from Zilani space. Every military ship the Federation sent to help had been destroyed. The Vorthak were too smart. They learned from every fight and got stronger each time. 3 whole battle fleets had tried to stop the Vorthak. Now they were nothing but floating metal in space. The Admiral's hands shook as he read the latest reports. The Zilani were dying. Their beautiful worlds were being eaten alive. The Federation Council met in secret. These were the leaders of all, the space governments. Some looked like lizards, others like fish that walked on land. A few looked almost human, but with blue skin or extra eyes. They all spoke different languages, but their computers translated everything. "We should save who we can and run away," said one council member. His skin was bright green and he had 4 eyes. "No," said another. "We make our last stand here. We fight until the end." The room got quiet. Everyone knew that both ideas meant the same thing. The Zilani would die, and the Vorthak would keep moving through the galaxy, eating everything. Then, an old reptile man named Thaxrun spoke up. His voice was rough like sandpaper. "What about the humans?" The room went silent. Everyone knew about Earth's history. Long ago, humans had fought terrible wars against each other. They had almost destroyed their own planet several times. But that was ancient history now. Modern humans seemed soft and peaceful. Admiral Kextar shook his big insect head. "The humans we know today are artists and shop owners. They have not fought a real war in over a century. What could they do against the Vorthak?" Thaxrun's old eyes gleamed. "Maybe the humans we know are not the only humans that exist. Maybe there are others. Humans who remember the old ways." The other council members did not like this idea. They whispered among themselves. Some said it was crazy. Others said it was too dangerous. What if these violent humans turned on the Federation? But time was running out. Every hour they waited, more Zilani died. Finally, Admiral Kextar made the decision. "We will send a message to Earth. We will ask for volunteers for a mission that will probably kill everyone who goes." The message was sent through official channels to Earth's government. The leaders on Earth were kind, peaceful people. They read the request and felt sad for the Zilani. But they could only offer a small group of ceremonial guards. These were humans who marched in parades and looked pretty in uniforms. They had never seen real fighting. But the message did not stay secret. It spread through hidden computer networks and secret communication channels. It reached places the Earth government did not know about. It found its way to humans who lived in the shadows, far from the peaceful cities of Earth. In the outer edges of human space, on lonely mining stations, and forgotten colonies, the message was read by different kinds of people. These were the descendants of soldiers and warriors. They were humans who had never forgotten what their species was really capable of when pushed too far. Jake Morrison was working on an asteroid mining station when he got the message. He was 52 years old, with scars on his face and hands that told stories he never talked about. He had been a Special Forces soldier once, but that was supposed to be secret. Officially, humans had not fought any wars in space. Unofficially, Jake had been in battles that would give people nightmares. He read the message 3 times. The Zilani were dying. The Federation was helpless. They needed volunteers for a suicide mission against an enemy that had never been beaten. Jake sat in his small room on the mining station. The walls were covered with pictures of places he had been and people he had known. Many of those people were dead now. They had died in fights that never officially happened, in wars that were never declared. He thought about the Zelani. He had met some of them during his travels. They were gentle people who grew beautiful gardens and made art from living plants. They had never hurt anyone. They did not deserve to die like this. Jake made his decision. He typed a short message back to the Federation. How many do you need? Within an hour, his message had spread through the hidden networks. Other humans like Jake read it and understood. The call had gone out. The dangerous humans, the ones who remembered what their species used to be, were being asked to fight again. The Federation had asked for help from humanity. They thought they would get a few dozen peaceful soldiers who looked good in parades. They had no idea what was really coming their way. In secret places throughout human space, weapons were being cleaned and old friendships were being renewed. Ships were being prepared and plans were being made. The deadliest humans in the galaxy were getting ready to answer the call. The Vorthax swarm had never faced anything like what was heading toward them. They had fought many species and always won. But they had never fought humans who had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. The Federation was about to learn what humanity was really like when the gloves came off. Jake Morrison's message spread like fire through the dark corners of human space. It reached people the Federation had never heard of. These were humans who lived in the shadows of the peaceful galaxy. They were the ones who did the dirty work, that kept the nice, clean world safe. Linda Hayes was working at her security company on a planet called New Arizona when she got the message. She was 43 years old and had been a Marine sniper for 10 years before she started her own business. Her job was protecting farmers and miners from space pirates and dangerous animals. Linda read Jake's message while sitting in her small office. Outside her window, she could see the red desert where she had built her life. She had clients who depended on her. She had employees who needed their jobs. But something about the message made her think of her old friends from the Marines. Most of them were dead now, killed in battles that never made the news. She made her choice quickly. Within 2 days, she had sold her company and bought a ticket on the next ship heading toward Jake's meeting point. Her employees thought she was crazy. Her clients begged her to stay. But Linda knew that some things were more important than money. Tony Rodriguez got the message while his crew was salvaging cargo from a wrecked ship near the edge of known space. Salvaging was a polite word for what Tony and his team really did. They were thieves, but they only stole from other thieves. Pirates who attacked honest traders would sometimes find their ships mysteriously empty when they returned to their hideouts. Tony's crew was special. Carlos Mendez could make bombs from anything he found lying around. He once blew up a pirate base using cleaning supplies and cooking oil. Katie Sullivan had been a spy before she joined Tony's team. She could hack into any computer system and make it do whatever she wanted. When Tony showed them Jake's message, they did not need to talk about it. They had all lost friends to alien pirates and slavers. The Federation's laws said these criminals should be arrested and put in jail, but the Federation's police were too far away to help when honest people were being hurt. Tony and his crew knew how to hunt predators. They had been doing it for years. The Vorthax sounded like just another group of bullies who needed to be stopped. Alex Chen was piloting cargo ships between the ice mines of Europa when the message found him. He was a quiet man who kept to himself. His hands shook sometimes from old nerve damage. People thought it was from an accident in the mines. They did not know that Alex had been a fighter pilot in conflicts that officially never happened. Alex had flown impossible missions in the dark spaces between stars. He had fought alien pirates who raided human colonies. He had saved ships full of families from creatures that wanted to eat them. The Federation said these fights never happened, because they would make the galaxy seem less peaceful. But Alex remembered every battle. He remembered every friend who died screaming in the vacuum of space. He remembered what it felt like to be humanity's last hope against things that came from the dark. When he read about the Zelani, Alex felt something he had not felt in years. Purpose. He quit his job that same day and started preparing his ship for war. Dr. Lisa Park worked at a research station studying alien plants. That was her official job. Unofficially, she was one of the few humans who knew how to fight alien diseases and poisons. She had developed cures for weapons that officially did not exist. Lisa knew things about alien biology that would terrify most people. She knew which species were secretly planning to hurt humans. She knew about biological weapons that could kill entire planets, and she knew how to fight back. When she got Jake's message, Lisa smiled for the first time in months. Finally, someone was asking her to use her knowledge to help instead of just preparing for disasters that might never come. One by one, they came to Jake's meeting point. It was an old space station that had been abandoned for decades. No government claimed it, no police patrolled it. It was the perfect place for humans to gather without being noticed. They arrived in ships that did not appear on any official records. Some were old military vessels that were supposed to have been scrapped. Others were civilian ships that had been heavily modified with weapons and armor. All of them were piloted by people who knew how to disappear when they wanted to. 47 humans met in the empty corridors of the dead station. They were all different ages and came from different backgrounds. Some had been soldiers. Others had been police officers or security guards. A few had been criminals who decided to use their skills for something good. But they all had one thing in common. They had seen what the galaxy was really like when the lights went out, and the nice, peaceful facade fell away. They knew that there were monsters out there, and someone had to fight them. Jake Morrison looked at the group of volunteers and felt something he had not felt since his military days. Hope. These were not the soft, peaceful humans the galaxy knew about. These were predators. They were survivors. They were the children of warriors who had conquered Earth through 10,000 years of constant warfare. The Federation thought humans were merchants and artists. They had no idea that humanity had never really stopped being what it was. They had just gotten better at hiding their true nature. While the volunteers prepared their ships for the journey to Zilani space, they monitored Federation communications. The news was getting worse by the hour. Zilani cities were falling faster than anyone had predicted. The Federation's evacuation ships were being hunted down and destroyed. Jake made a decision that would change everything. Instead of trying to join the retreating Federation forces, the humans would do what they did best. They would attack when everyone else was running away. Admiral Kextar received a brief message from the human ships. Going to target. Do not follow. Then the human vessels vanished from all tracking systems. They used tricks and technology that the Federation did not know existed. The Admiral stared at his empty screens and wondered what he had just unleashed. He had asked for help from humanity's peaceful government. Instead, he was getting something far more dangerous. He was getting humans who remembered what their species was capable of when someone threatened the innocent. The Vorthak swarm had spent thousands of years perfecting their tactics. They had conquered hundreds of worlds and destroyed dozens of spacefaring civilizations. They had never met an enemy they could not eventually defeat, but they had never fought humans who had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. They had never faced a species that had spent its entire evolutionary history learning how to kill things that were bigger, stronger, and more numerous than they were. The swarm was about to learn why humans had fought their way to the top of Earth's food chain, and why some of them had never forgotten the lessons of that ancient struggle. In the dark between the stars, 47 human ships moved toward their destiny. Behind them, they left the safety of known space. Ahead of them lay an enemy that had never been defeated. It was exactly the kind of odds that humans had been beating for millions of years. The Vorthak swarm had a simple way of fighting. They sent thousands of ships at their enemies all at once. Each ship was weaker than most Federation vessels, but numbers always won in the end. The swarm would adapt and learn from each battle, becoming stronger every time they fought. When the first Vorthak bioships detected the human fleet in the outer Zilani system, they expected the usual pattern. Enemy ships would form neat battle lines. They would fire their weapons in organized volleys. The swarm would study their tactics, adapt, and eventually overwhelm them with superior numbers. Instead, Something happened that had never happened before in Vorthak history. The human ships scattered like animals running from a predator, but they were not running away. They were hunting. Jake Morrison's ship led the attack. It had been a mining vessel once, but now it bristled with weapons that should not have fit on such a small craft. The modifications were crude but effective. This was not a warship built by engineers in clean factories. This was a weapon built by someone who understood that sometimes ugly solutions were the only ones that worked. The first group of Vorthak ships moved to intercept Jake's vessel. They had faced mining ships before. Usually the miners would surrender or try to run away. Instead, Jake's ship accelerated directly toward them, weapons blazing. Alex Chen's fighter screamed through the Vorthak formation like a bullet through paper. His ship was impossibly fast because he had removed everything that was not essential for fighting. Life support was minimal. Armor was almost non-existent. But the weapons could punch holes through ships 10 times his size. The Vorthak collective mind tried to understand what it was seeing. These tactics made no sense. The humans were taking ridiculous risks. Their ships should have been destroyed in the first few minutes. But somehow Vorthak vessels kept exploding while the humans seemed untouchable. Linda Hayes positioned her ship at extreme range from the battle. Her vessel looked like a normal cargo hauler, but hidden inside was a sniper rifle the size of a small building. She had spent years perfecting the art of long-range shooting in space. While other ships fired thousands of rounds hoping to hit something, Linda fired once and hit exactly what she was aiming for. Her first shot destroyed a Vorthak command ship from a distance that should have been impossible. The bioship never even knew it was being targeted. One moment it was coordinating an attack on Alex's fighter. The next moment, it was expanding debris. The Vorthak swarm began to adapt, as it always did. It analyzed the human weapon signatures and adjusted its defensive bioarmor. It studied the attack patterns and prepared countermeasures. This had always worked before. Learn from the enemy and become stronger. But then Tony Rodriguez's team showed why humans had been fighting each other for so long. Their ship appeared to be disabled, drifting helplessly in space with no power and no weapons. Several Vorthak bioships moved in to investigate, expecting to find easy prey. Carlos Mendez waited until the alien ships were close enough to touch. Then he triggered the mines he had built from cargo containers and industrial chemicals. The explosion was not pretty or elegant. It was brutal and effective. The local area became a cloud of superheated gas and twisted metal. The disabled human ship immediately powered up its hidden weapons and began systematically hunting down any Vorthak vessels that had survived the blast. Tony's crew did not fight like honorable warriors. They fought like predators who had learned their trade in the dark alleys of human space. Dr. Lisa Park's contribution was more subtle, but equally deadly. She had spent years studying alien biology, including the living ships that the Vorthak used. While the other humans fought with bullets and explosives, Lisa fought with knowledge. She released clouds of specially designed toxins that targeted the Vorthak's organic technology. The bioships began suffering mysterious system failures. Weapons that should have been regenerating damage instead started consuming themselves. Ships that had been alive for centuries began dying from diseases they had never encountered. The Vorthak collective mind experienced something it had never felt before. Confusion. These humans did not fight like any other species the swarm had encountered. They ignored basic rules of warfare. They took impossible risks and somehow survived. Worst of all, they seemed to be enjoying themselves. Katie Sullivan coordinated the human attack from inside Tony's ship. She had hacked into the Vorthak communication networks within minutes of first contact. Now she was feeding false information to the swarm, making them think human ships were in places they were not, or making them ignore real threats. The battle that should have lasted a few hours stretched into days. The Vorthak kept expecting to adapt to human tactics, but the humans kept changing what they were doing. Every time the swarm thought it understood how humans fought, they would do something completely different. Alex Chen demonstrated this perfectly when he pretended to develop engine trouble. 3 Vorthak ships moved in to finish him off. Instead of running or fighting, Alex did something the aliens had never seen before. He rammed his ship directly into the largest bioship at full speed. The impact should have killed Alex instantly. Instead, he ejected at the last second in a tiny escape pod that immediately began broadcasting a surrender signal. The Vorthak, who had never encountered the concept of surrender, were confused about what to do with him. While they were distracted, Linda Hayes put a sniper round through their command center from half a star system away. Alex was picked up by Jake's ship 5 minutes later, grinning like a madman. But the real shock to the Vorthak came when they tried their standard adaptive tactics. They began copying human maneuvers, learning from each engagement as they always did. This was their greatest strength, the ability to steal enemy tactics and use them better than the original users. What they did not understand was that humans had been fighting other humans for thousands of years. Every trick the Vorthak tried to copy had already been countered by human military thinking. Jake Morrison and his team did not just expect the swarm to adapt, they encouraged it. They fed the collective consciousness a steady diet of tactics that looked successful but were actually elaborate traps. When the Vorthak copied a human attack pattern, they found themselves flying directly into ambushes. When they tried to duplicate human defensive positions, they discovered that the positions were designed to funnel attackers into kill zones. The Federation monitoring stations watched the battle with growing amazement. Their computers could not explain what was happening. By all logic, the humans should have been overwhelmed in the first hour. They were outnumbered 1,000 to 1. Their ships were smaller and less advanced than Vorthak biovessels, yet somehow the swarm was losing. For the first time in their history, the Vorthak were retreating from a battlefield. More importantly, they had stopped their advance toward the Zilani homeworld. The invasion had stalled because 47 humans refused to follow the rules. Admiral Kextar sent increasingly urgent requests for human tactical data. He wanted to understand how such a small force was achieving the impossible. The responses he received were brief and unhelpful. Classified. Stay away from the combat zone. On the bridge of his command ship, Jake Morrison studied the tactical display with grim satisfaction. The first phase of his plan was complete. The Vorthak now saw humans as a serious threat instead of just another minor nuisance to be swept aside. This was exactly what Jake had been hoping for. Because if the Vorthak saw humans as dangerous, they would commit more resources to destroying the small human force. They would pull ships away from the attack on Zilani worlds to deal with what they perceived as the greater threat. Jake smiled as he watched more Vorthak reinforcements arriving in the system. The aliens were taking the bait perfectly. Soon, they would commit so many ships to hunting humans that they would leave their real objectives undefended. And that was when the real battle would begin. The Vorthak swarm made its first big mistake when it decided the humans were a real threat. The collective mind pulled 3 entire hive fleets away from attacking Zilani worlds. Thousands of bioships that had been eating planets were now hunting 47 human vessels across the Kepler system. This was exactly what Jake Morrison had wanted to happen. What followed was not a normal space battle. It was a deadly game of hide-and-seek played across an entire star system. The humans had no intention of fighting fair. They were going to use every dirty trick they had learned from centuries of human warfare. Katie Sullivan took charge of making the Vorthak see things that were not there. She used holograms, sensor ghosts, and pieces of floating junk to create fake ships. The swarm thought it was tracking 47 human vessels, but their sensors showed contacts appearing and disappearing all over the system. Sometimes there seemed to be 50 human ships, sometimes 70. Sometimes the same ship appeared to be in 3 different places at once. The Vorthak collective mind had never encountered an enemy that lied so creatively. The swarm's biggest strength became its biggest weakness. When one Vorthak ship learned something about human tactics, that information spread instantly to every other ship in the fleet. This had always been an advantage before. But the humans were deliberately teaching them false lessons. Alex Chen demonstrated this perfectly. He started attacking Vorthak scout ships using the same pattern over and over. Approach from the left, fire 3 shots, then retreat to the right. The collective mind quickly adapted, positioning ships to block his escape route and counter his attack pattern. Then Alex revealed that he had been studying how they adapted. He had learned to predict their countermeasures. When they moved ships to block his retreat, he was already attacking from a completely different direction. He had been playing a game with their minds, and he was winning. Dr. Lisa Park's biological weapons became more important as the fighting continued. She had figured out weaknesses in the Vorthak bioships that their own collective consciousness could not see. Working with Carlos Mendez, she created weapons that attacked the alien ships at the cellular level. The results were horrifying to watch. Bioships that had been alive for hundreds of years began dying like they had caught a disease. Their living hulls started dissolving. Their organic weapons stopped working. Some ships began attacking themselves as their nervous systems went crazy. The psychological effect on the Vorthak was even more important than the physical damage. For the first time in their species' history, they were experiencing something like fear. They were used to being the predators. Now they were being hunted by something they did not understand. Tony Rodriguez's crew perfected the art of the ambush. They would hide in asteroid fields, inside clouds of space dust, or even in the atmosphere of gas giant planets. When Vorthak ships came looking for them, the humans would attack with overwhelming firepower and then disappear before help could arrive. Each ambush was perfectly planned, but no two were the same. The swarm could not predict where the next attack would come from because the humans never used the same hiding place twice. They fought like ghosts, appearing just long enough to kill and then vanishing into the dark. Linda Hayes achieved something that should have been impossible. She killed a Vorthak queen. The queens were the most protected individuals in Vorthak society. They stayed in the center of massive formations, surrounded by hundreds of guard ships. They coordinated the activities of thousands of drones. Killing one should have required an entire fleet. Linda did it with a single shot from impossible range. She had been studying the Vorthak formations for days, using Dr. Park's biological data to identify which ships contained queens. When she found her target, she waited for the perfect moment. As the Vorthak formation moved past a gas giant, Linda used the planet's gravity to bend her shot around a moon. The queen died instantly. Her bioship, a living creature the size of a city, began convulsing as its nervous system shut down. But the real damage was to the surrounding fleet. Without their queen's coordination, hundreds of Vorthak drones began attacking each other. The humans watched in amazement as an entire enemy formation tore itself apart. Ships that had worked together for centuries suddenly became enemies. The collective consciousness, faced with the unthinkable death of a queen, fractured into chaos. Admiral Kekstar monitored the battle from Federation headquarters, unable to believe what his sensors were telling him. The humans had been outnumbered 1,000 to 1 at the start of the engagement. Now they were systematically dismantling 3 hive fleets using tactics that seemed to come from a nightmare. The Admiral sent an urgent message to Jake Morrison. "What are your goals? How can we help?" Jake's response was typical of human directness. "Stay out of our way. We are about to end this." The Vorthak Collective made its second crucial mistake. Desperate to eliminate the human threat, it committed its reserve forces to the battle. For the first time since their species had left their home system, the Vorthak concentrated their entire invasion force in one place. This included the Prime Queen's personal guard, ships that had never been defeated in battle, bio-vessels that were more like living fortresses than normal spacecraft. The collective mind had decided that the human threat was so dangerous that it was worth risking everything to destroy it. Jake Morrison watched the enemy reinforcements arrive and smiled grimly. His trap was working perfectly. The Vorthak had pulled ships from dozens of star systems to hunt his small force. Zilani worlds that had been under attack were now free because their attackers had been called away to fight humans. But Jake's plan was not finished yet. He had one more surprise for the swarm. Katie Sullivan had been inside their communication networks for days now. She understood how the collective consciousness worked. She knew how information flowed between ships and how decisions were made. Most importantly, she had figured out how to disrupt that flow. As the final Vorthak reinforcements arrived in the system, Katie triggered a virus she had been carefully crafting. It was not a computer virus. It was an information virus designed to attack the way the swarm shared thoughts. The effect was immediate, and devastating. Ships that should have been coordinating their attacks began working at cross purposes. The collective consciousness started receiving contradictory information from its own vessels. Some bioships thought they were winning. Others thought they were losing. A few became convinced that they were fighting an entirely different enemy. The perfect unity that had made the Vorthak so dangerous began to crumble. They were still individually dangerous, but they were no longer fighting as one mind controlling thousands of bodies. They were fighting as thousands of individuals who no longer trusted their own senses. Alex Chen led the final assault on the confused Vorthak formations. His fighter, damaged and running on backup power, screamed through their ranks like a bullet through tissue paper. Behind him came the other human ships, each one targeting the command vessels that were trying to restore order to the chaos. It was not a fair fight. The humans had spent days learning how the Vorthak communicated and coordinated. Now they were systematically destroying every ship that tried to restore the collective consciousness. They were not just winning a battle, they were performing surgery on an alien mind. The Vorthak Prime Queen herself arrived in the system as her forces began to collapse. Her bioship was enormous, a living fortress that had been alive since before humans learned to use fire. She was accompanied by her personal guard, ships that had conquered 100 worlds. But even the Prime Queen's arrival could not save the swarm. The collective consciousness was too damaged. The virus Katie had introduced was spreading faster than the Vorthak could contain it. Ships throughout the system were beginning to turn on each other as the shared mind that held them together fell apart. Jake Morrison gathered his team leaders for what might be their final briefing. The battle was won, but Jake had an even more ambitious plan. He was not content with just defeating the Vorthak. He wanted to do something that no one had ever done before. He wanted to capture the Prime Queen alive. The idea was insane even by human standards. But Jake had been studying the Vorthak throughout the entire engagement. He thought he understood something about them that even they did not know about themselves. The swarm was not evil. They were just afraid. The final battle began when the Vorthak Prime Queen arrived in her massive bioship. The vessel was the size of a small moon, covered in living armor that had grown over thousands of years. It was surrounded by hundreds of escort ships, each one a veteran of countless battles. Jake Morrison called his team together for one last meeting. The plan, he explained, was so crazy that even these hardened fighters looked at him like he had lost his mind. They were going to board the Prime Queen's ship, not to kill her, but to capture her alive. Dr. Lisa Park had been studying Vorthak biology throughout the entire battle. She had discovered something important about the Queens. They were not just leaders. They were the living memory of their entire species. Everything the Vorthak had ever learned was stored in the Queen's minds. If they could capture the Prime Queen and find a way to talk to her, they might be able to end not just this invasion, but the Vorthak threat forever. It was a long shot, but it was better than just killing everyone and solving nothing. The assault began with all 47 human ships attacking the Prime Queen's escorts. But this was not meant to destroy the enemy fleet. It was a distraction to keep the Vorthak busy, while a single small ship slipped through their defenses. Alex Chen piloted the boarding craft with Tony Rodriguez and his team inside. The ship was barely large enough for 6 people, but it was fast and almost invisible to sensors. While thousands of Vorthak ships fought the human fleet, Alex guided his tiny vessel through the chaos toward the Prime Queen's bioship. Getting inside the living fortress was easier than anyone had expected. The Vorthak had never encountered an enemy that wanted to board their ships instead of destroying them. Their defenses were designed to stop missiles and energy beams, not small craft carrying soldiers. Inside the bioship, Tony's team found something they had not expected. The Vorthak drones seemed almost paralyzed with fear. The collective consciousness was in chaos because of Katie Sullivan's virus, but there was something else. These aliens were experiencing emotions they had never felt before. For their entire history, the Vorthak had been the hunters. They had never been prey. Now they were being stalked through their own ship by creatures they did not understand. The psychological impact was devastating. Katie Sullivan used her computer skills to navigate the living corridors of the bioship. She had learned to read the ship's biological signals like a map. When they encountered defensive positions, Carlos Mendez used his explosives to disable them without causing serious damage. They needed the ship to stay alive for their plan to work. The most dangerous part came when they reached the Prime Queen's chamber. She was ancient beyond human understanding. Her mind contained the memories of thousands of conquered worlds and millions of dead enemies. When she tried to communicate with the humans, they felt her thoughts directly pressing against their minds. The Queen expected to find primitive, savage creatures driven by simple aggression. Instead, she discovered something that shook her to her core. These humans were not primitive at all. They were the children of warriors who had been fighting for so long that war had become an art form. Linda Hayes provided protection, while Dr. Park attempted to establish real communication with the Queen. The process was dangerous. Direct contact with a Vorthak mind could drive a human insane. But Park had been preparing for this moment throughout the entire battle. What she discovered changed everything they thought they knew about the Vorthak. The swarm was not a race of conquerors driven by aggression. They were refugees. Their original home had been destroyed long ago by something they called the Machine Plague. These were artificial intelligences that converted organic matter into more machines, spreading like a virus across the galaxy. The Vorthak had been running from this threat for thousands of years. The constant expansion, the consumption of worlds for resources, the relentless advance through space. It was all driven by a species-wide trauma that had been passed down through countless generations. The Prime Queen's mind showed them images of the ancient enemy, machines that could think and reproduce, turning entire planets into factories for building more machines. The Vorthak had fled their home system just ahead of this mechanical plague, and they had been running ever since. They consumed worlds not because they were evil, but because they were terrified. They attacked other species not from hatred, but from a desperate need to stay ahead of the machines that they believed were still chasing them. Jake Morrison received this information as his team prepared to escape from the bioship. The revelation forced him to make a choice that would define humanity's future in the galaxy. They could complete their original mission, destroy the Vorthak, and save the Zilani. Or they could try something much more difficult and dangerous. They could try to heal a broken species. The decision Jake made was completely human. Instead of destroying the Prime Queen, he offered her something the Vorthak had not had in thousands of years: hope. The proposal was simple. Humanity would help the Vorthak find a new home, far from the machine threat they had been fleeing. In return, the swarm would stop attacking Federation worlds and begin learning to live peacefully with other species. It would not be easy. The Vorthak had been shaped by trauma for so long that they barely remembered how to do anything except consume and flee. But humans understood trauma. They had spent their entire history recovering from wars and disasters. The Prime Queen's response came not in words but in action. Across the Kepler system, Vorthak bioships began withdrawing from Zilani space. The invasion stopped not because the swarm had been defeated, but because they had been offered something they thought they would never have: a chance to stop running. Admiral Kextar received a final message from Jake Morrison. Mission complete. The Zilani are safe. We recommend immediate diplomatic contact with Vorthak leadership. Also recommend you update your files on human capabilities. The Federation leader stared at the message for a long time. He had asked for help from Earth's peaceful government. Instead, he had gotten something far more dangerous and far more valuable. He had gotten humans who remembered what their species was really capable of when the stakes were high enough. As the human volunteers scattered back to their hidden corners of the galaxy, the Federation began to understand an important truth. They had thought they knew humanity because they knew Earth's merchants and diplomats. They had no idea that humans had never really stopped being predators. They had just learned when to hunt and when to show mercy. The galaxy would never underestimate humanity again. More importantly, neither would humanity itself. 6 months later, the Federation established its first diplomatic mission to a Vorthak colony world. The former refugees were learning to build instead of consume, to create instead of destroy. It was a slow process guided by human advisors who understood both violence and healing. Dr. Lisa Park worked with Vorthak biologists to develop new forms of organic technology that helped instead of harmed. Tony Rodriguez trained former swarm warriors in defensive tactics that did not require conquering other species. Alex Chen taught Vorthak pilots how to explore space without fleeing from imaginary enemies. Admiral Kekstar updated the Federation's files on human military capabilities. The new classification read, Threat Level, Absolute. Recommendation, do not engage under any circumstances. Note, fortunately, they appear to be on our side. On Earth, the peaceful government received the Federation's report and filed it away with a confused note. Recommend increased funding for veteran programs. They still did not understand what had happened in the Kepler system, and perhaps that was for the best. In the dark spaces between stars, humanity's most dangerous children returned to their quiet lives. They went back to mining asteroids, running security companies, and conducting research in forgotten laboratories. They did not think of themselves as heroes. They had simply done what humans do when faced with an impossible situation. They had adapted. They had survived. They had chosen violence when violence was necessary, and mercy when mercy was possible. And somewhere in the depths of space, ancient machines continued their slow advance toward Federation territory, converting worlds into more machines consuming everything in their path. But that was a problem for another day. When that day came, the galaxy would know who to call. They would call the deadliest humans in the galaxy. And those humans would answer, just as they always would, because that was what humanity did best.